landing on the moon. India is on the moon.
What a moment! India has made history. The South Asian country has reached the moon. We will tell you more on this exhilarating mission to the moon. Hello there, I am Dasani Athada and you are watching Inside South Asia. Amidst growing economic, strategic and global might, India has now made a mark on the moon, and that too quite literally. India's Chandrayaan-3 was the first ever to land on the moon's south pole. This now makes India join an elite club of just 4 countries that have landed on the moon's surface, a historic moment for the entire nation. This also says that India's space journey is just about to start and move on to do greater things. India's father of space science, Vikram Sarabhai, once said, "There are some who question the relevance of space activities in a developing nation. But we are convinced that if we are to play a meaningful role nationally and in the community of nations, we must be second to none in the application of advanced technologies to the real problems of man and society." These words of Sarabhai resonate with the millions of Indians who are praying for the successful landing of India's 3rd lunar mission, Chandrayaan-3.
And we are nearly at zero velocity, vertical and horizontal. We were hovering and now we are approaching the moon's surface.
धीरे धीरे लैंडर की वेगमान को कम किया जा रहा है और हम अब लगभग 50 मीटर से भी कम आ चुके हैं.
We can see the Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, who is here to encourage us, and he is critically looking at the visuals.
आप अपनी स्क्रीन पे देख सकते हैं कि हम
We have achieved soft landing on the moon. India is on the moon.
This feather in India's cap is as big as it gets. The 23rd of August 2023, the world had waited for this moment with bated breath. 1.4 billion prayers rested on this. The challenge was keeping touchdown speeds within safe limits, and heartbeats ran high. The moments can hardly be expressed, only felt.
Zero, come on! Woo!
कहावत है
Man, this is proper history in the making. Abhi.
We just saw it and it's a historical moment for India. We feel very proud to be Indians today.
I'm feeling super excited and super motivated. Now I also want to be the part of ISRO because it motivated me a lot.
India becomes the first country to land on the moon's south pole and only the 4th ever to reach the surface of our closest cosmic neighbor and natural satellite. That speck in the sky that has intrigued generations. The celebrations and congratulatory messages from around India and the world are a testament.
नाम सोमनाथ और सोमनाथ नाम चंद्र से जुड़ा हुआ है और इसलिए आज आपके परिवारजन भी बहुत आनंदित होंगे। मेरी तरफ से आपको, आपकी पूरी टीम को बहुत बहुत बधाई।
2 years of hard work of scientists, of huge lessons learnt, of massive challenges overcome, and it propels India into the future like seldom before.
India's successful moon mission is not just India's alone. This success belongs to all of humanity.
The Chandrayaan-3 mission was launched on the 14th of July. The landing marks India's emergence as a global space power, as the government looks to spur investment in private space launches and related satellite-based businesses. Interestingly, the mission comes at a price tag of $74.6 million. That's way below that of other countries. Looking forward, it's now over to the rover Pragyan, the research module that Vikram lander carried to the moon surface. And that process has begun. Over the coming 15 days or so, that's one lunar day, Pragyan will collect and send back images from the moon's south pole that will provide rare insights. And therein lie big gains for India's space program ahead. As ISRO said in its victory message, India, I reached my destination, and you too. The magic takes off from there.
And as we told you, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi was watching the entire mission from South Africa, where he is attending the Brics meeting. Up next, we bring you all what happened at Brics and why is Bangladesh pinning its hopes on the grouping.
Representing more than a quarter of the global GDP and 42% of the world population, leaders of the BRICS nations met in Johannesburg this week to consolidate the bloc's position and expand its influence in the backdrop of the new world alignment between the West and Russia. The meeting comes amid the ongoing war in Ukraine, which is reshaping the global order. No wonder more than 40 countries expressed an interest in joining the bloc and nearly 24 formally asked to be admitted, of which 6 countries made it to the list: Iran, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Ethiopia, Egypt and Argentina. While Iran and Saudi Arabia have shown affinity to China lately, with the latter brokering a peace deal between the two West Asian neighbors, the UAE has been forging strategic relations with India. Outside of West Asia, 2 African nations, Ethiopia and Egypt, made the cut. Argentina has been struggling with its economy lately, represents the global south from the continent of South America. India's neighbor, Bangladesh, also made a bid to join the bloc but did not make the cut in the latest editions. While China and Russia want to reinforce the BRICS grouping amid new tensions with the West and consolidate their position, India has cautiously supported the group's expansion, given India's own proximity to the West and the United States. Prime Minister Modi, in his speech on day 2 of the closed-door meeting, supported the group's expansion and also talked about increasing the group's cooperation on space, education and technology.
हम ब्रिक्स सैटेलाइट कॉन्स्टेलेशन पर पहले से काम कर रहे हैं। एक कदम आगे बढ़ाते हुए हम ब्रिक्स स्पेस एक्सप्लोरेशन कंसोर्टियम बनाने पर विचार कर सकते हैं। इसके अंतर्गत हम स्पेस रिसर्च, वेदर मॉनिटरिंग जैसे क्षेत्रों में ग्लोबल गुड के लिए काम कर सकते हैं। मेरा दूसरा सुझाव है शिक्षा, स्किल डेवलपमेंट और टेक्नोलॉजी में सहयोग। ब्रिक्स को एक फ्यूचर रेडी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बनाने के लिए हमें अपनी सोसाइटीज को फ्यूचर रेडी बनाना होगा।
Apart from the expansion of the group, member nations also discuss ways to reduce dependence on the US dollar and trade in local currencies. The Russian President Vladimir Putin said the de-dollarization of the bloc was irreversible. Putin, who did not attend the summit in person and is wanted under an international arrest warrant for alleged war crimes in Ukraine, has been keen to show the West he still has friends. All eyes were, however, on Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping. A brief interaction between the two leaders resulted in what is being seen as a breakthrough. The two agreed to work on easing tensions at the border. However, there was also fresh controversy, with both sides suggesting the talks were initiated by the other side. India denied China's claims. The family photo reinstated the power of the group, with three major emerging economies of China, India and Russia. The bloc's expansion made the global headlines as it was pushed heavily by Russia and China facing Western sanction. The expansion and attempt to reshape the global order and put voices from the global south and the emerging economies at the center of the world agenda.
2 years into the second edition of Taliban's rule on Afghanistan gives us a better reason to look closely as to how it rose into power, even at the hands of an apparent defeat by the Americans. The world sees the Taliban as an inhumane and fanatic group of leadership. Yet, there is no denying on its grip on power.
Images of desperation as Kabul fell back into Taliban hands in 2021. Evacuate, flee, make a run for it. Anything to escape Afghanistan, as a bottomless pit that was Taliban rule lay ahead. The Americans had been routed after 15 years in control of Afghanistan, hundreds of them killed. Here's decoding the flames that kept the Taliban alive despite apparent pressures, as defined by American political scientist Christine Fair. The George W. Bush administration had blundered way back in October 2001, post 9/11, when it joined hands with Pakistan to oust Pakistan's own assets of sorts, the Taliban. Under the banner Operation Enduring Freedom, American-led forces quickly toppled the Taliban. The Taliban fled to sanctuaries in Pakistan's tribal areas. Many with strong links to the Pakistan army were even given safe passage. Taliban sympathizer Jan Orakzai, who was appointed to lead Pakistan's forces by then Pak President Musharraf, is said to have helped Osama bin Laden escape from the Tora Bora mountains to Abbottabad in Pakistan, where he was killed a decade later. The US spent nearly $2.3 trillion in Afghanistan, but who raked in most of this money? Defense contractors. Many of them were Afghan government firms and even Americans themselves. A large chunk of the funds were stolen or spent on poorly executed projects. The Americans even bribed Afghan government officials to act as spies. Credibility of the Afghan government suffered. It worked to the Taliban's gain, and it got the image of a religious, disciplined force. Again, Americans ended up fueling the Taliban insurgency. Keeping in place a weak and failing political system in Afghanistan ensured the Americans the control they wanted. The White House seemingly deliberately kept the Afghan polity a system characterized by fragmentation and illegitimacy. No political parties, no parliament in the way to deal with, and a president, in this case Hamid Karzai, who would rubber stamp US objectives. As soon as the Americans decided to walk away, this was a system waiting to fall apart and fall into Taliban hands. Switch back to the present day. Despite global condemnation and local disapproval, there's no real threat to the Taliban regime in sight. A struggling economy remains afloat even as sections of the international community, including powerhouse China, are keen to reach out diplomatically and for strategic gain. All these are reasons enough for Taliban 2.0 to celebrate, despite the situation for the common man going downhill. And America's mishandling does show through.
A string of vicious weather phenomena fueled by global warming and climate change is sweeping across South Asia. The most notable of it is the retreat of glaciers, flooding and even landslides. The toll and the impact, in short, is not favorable for the entire region. Here's a look at this alarming story.
The story of Nepal extending into Bhutan, little spoken about but increasingly real. Nepal has been seeing major disasters around glacial melting almost every consecutive year since 2012. The country contributes just 0.027% of global greenhouse gas emissions, yet it is the fourth most vulnerable to climate change. Rising temperatures spell disaster. Glaciers across South Asia's Hindu Kush Himalayan belt, covering 6 countries, are melting at unprecedented rates.
Well, this is a very serious threat. You know, I've called climate change a threat multiplier for some time now, and we really see that happening in the Himalayas with the more rapid melting of the glaciers, creating glacier lakes leading to floods and landslides, really changing the whole ecosystem of the region at a rate that's difficult for humans to adapt. You know, the Himalayas are so important to both global ecosystems, global biodiversity, and of course, the people who live in the region.
Grim climate change and warming realities stare and hard. A mountain tourism-based economy like Nepal's is already showing signs of an impending setback. Changing snowfall patterns means uncertainty on tourist inflow. Beyond the blow to biodiversity and agricultural losses, a report by Nepal's International Center for Integrated Mountain Development warns that Himalayan glaciers disappeared 65% faster since 2010 than in the previous decade. Mount Everest's glaciers have lost 2,000 years of ice in just the past 30 years. At present rates of temperature rise, glaciers across the entire region will lose 30 to 50% of their volume by 2100, the report says, and that these changes are largely irreversible. It warns of an increased frequency of flash floods and avalanches if greenhouse gases are not sharply reduced.
The increased extreme events are already baked in because of the temperature rise we've already experienced from climate change, approaching well over a degree, and in some parts of the world, like in the Arctic, over 4 degrees now from baseline temperatures. So we have to change our energy systems, reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, and at the same time, we have to become more resilient to the climate risks we experience today.
The most dangerous outcome of heavy glacial melting in the plains. Water flows in the region's 12 river basins, including the Ganges, Indus, Satluj and Mekong in India and Pakistan, hold consequences for more than 1.65 billion people who depend on this supply. In the mountains, landslides have turned more frequent, disrupting life, wreaking havoc. Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand are the most recent examples. Himalayan communities are feeling the effects. Cracks on roads and houses in Joshimath in India's Uttarakhand have raised big concerns. Many residents in the sinking town had to be relocated. Corrective action has been initiated, but it's a big wake-up call.
Up next, let's take a look at a few of the stories that have been making headlines in South Asia.
Military helicopters and zipline experts rescued 8 people, including 6 schoolboys, trapped for hours in a stricken cable car high above a remote Pakistan valley. The daring rescue began with the helicopter plucking 2 children to safety almost 12 hours after the lift was precariously suspended. As darkness was setting in, the high-risk operation was completed after floodlights were installed. Ground-based rescuers moved in to remove the children to safety.
Another story coming from Pakistan. Around 100,000 people have been evacuated from flooded villages in Pakistan's Punjab province. Several hundred villages in the central province were inundated and thousands of acres of crops destroyed when the Satluj river overflowed. Meanwhile, Punjab caretaker Chief Minister Mohsin Naqvi said the scale of floods in the Satluj had not been seen in the last 35 years.
Nepal has started to face an acute shortage of onions, days after India slapped a 40% export tax on the vegetable. India has imposed a 40% tariff on export of onions till December 31st to restrict overseas sales. The move comes amid anticipation of a price rise ahead of the festival season when demand for most commodities goes up. The new tariff has severely affected traders in Kali Mata fruit and vegetable market in Nepal. This is the Himalayan nation's largest wholesale market for agricultural goods.
As humanitarian conditions in the world's largest refugee settlement worsen, the challenges surrounding this protracted crisis continue to increase. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, is calling on the international community to renew its commitment to Rohingya refugees who have fled persecution. Sustained support and solutions have been called for.
And that's all we have for you on our show this week. I'm Dasnia Thawda signing off. But before we leave, take a look at these visuals one more time, where India creates history and propels its space journey for the years to come.